Okay, so let's briefly talk about um, imperialism. Okay, um, we have just finished the Gilded Age. We kind of looked at it on a timeline in class. Um, Imperialism is part, it runs in, it's that catch up part of the sandwich where it runs right into the progressives. Okay. But the United States for the first time is going to become imperialistic. And if you'll look right here, imperialism, okay, acquiring land or gaining control over the politics and economics of another country. Okay, there's several ways you can do this. You can do this peacefully. You can do this by force. You can do this, and peacefully would be diplomacy. And some countries will want our interference, some countries will not. Okay? The first little piece of it is going to be Alaska. So, William Seward, at the time Secretary of State, is going to be made fun of for putting forth this, um, idea of buying Alaska from the Russians. They're like, what in the world's in Alaska? We don't need that. But Seward is very adamant. And he is going to convince Congress, but they're going to make fun of him, call it Seward's Folly, Seward's Icebox. Come to find out, as we know, there is oil in Alaska. So, really a steal of a deal. And Seward, got more than he really thought he would get. So, $7.2 million went to Russia to buy Alaska. Because remember, Alaska technically had that Bering Strait connecting to Russia, way back in history. So it's not there, obviously not there, and wasn't there here then, but it had been part of Russia's country. And now it becomes the United States, the 49th state. So then, if we look across, why would we want to be imperialistic? Why does America start? Well, it's kind of like peer pressure. Everybody else is, so why don't we do it too? Okay, and we didn't want to become a second class power. We wanted to stay on top. So, Alfred Mahan is going to be a big part of that with the Navy. He's going to build lots of ships. He's now the Secretary of the Navy. And by 1900, you were going to be the third largest Navy in the world. Okay, so big deal. Okay, so remember that James Monroe had written the Monroe Doctrine about the Western Hemisphere and, saying that, telling other countries kind of like a threat. Remember, that's one word that describes the Monroe Doctrine. I'm like, don't come over here or you're going to have to deal with us. So it kind of made us the protector already of Latin America. So we kind of just expand on this. Okay. Some causes of the United States becoming imperialistic: industry, okay, to grow, obviously, economic, new raw materials. Because remember, once you take a country over, colonize them, just like the United States had been colonies, their tobacco and things until they were on their own were going to the mother country, the British, to sell our goods, obviously. Okay, more markets to sell. Make a safety net of money. Okay, um, you know, everybody, if you've ever listened, about money, having a little safety net, a personal safety net, is always nice to have. Okay, so same applies with this idea of imperialism, is having more people to sell to, having more goods. Darwinism, the survival of the fittest. We are the best. That's what we think. Okay. And so we think that, the only people are going to survive is to be like us. Okay. And then the last component is Christianity. The missionaries of Christianity will feel like it's a duty for them to spread the word of God. Okay. And they will do this by way of imperialism at this time. Okay. So then I drew like big scratches, yellow journalism. This is going to have a big effect on imperialism. It fuels the flames of imperialism, and basically, yellow journalism is exaggerated news. So it's not false news. Okay, like tabloids to me. I mean, I'm not saying that every article is not true, but tabloids, they're false. Um, this is news that, has a nugget of truth, like, um, trying to think, trying to think of a nugget of truth. Um, Cooper, Cooper likes kindergarten. Okay. That's a nugget of truth. Now, exaggerated yellow journalism would explain, would go into detail and over exaggerate how much Cooper loves kindergarten and try to push the people reading it to go to his kindergarten class and to be a part of it. Okay. So it starts with the negative truth, but expands. Joseph Pulitzer and William Hearst, the Pulitzer Prize. These are going to be famous journalists that begin with yellow journalism. Okay. Um, so we're going to see a turning point. I can tell I've been on Mac this weekend. I'm scrolling the wrong way. U.S. arbitration during Venezuela versus the British colony in Guinea. So we arbitrate. Arbitrate means that we're like the mediators. We are kind of, um, giving advice, lending a hand, okay, over their issues. And we're going to kind of lean towards the British in Guinea. So this is going to mark the only reason this is a big deal because the whole arbitration thing is not a big deal, but this is going to mark our friendship, in which we're going to have for a very long time with Great Britain. We become allies at this point during this imperialistic time period, and that's why it needs to be noted. Groups of people that were expansionists were missionaries, politicians, and journalists. Queen Lugliani is in Hawaii. We expand. There's sugar plantations there. There's Americans there that own the sugar plantations. McKinley cuts a tax, okay, or adds a tax. He stops cutting the tax. Okay, so Hawaiian sugar didn't have a tax on it when it was sold in America. McKinley goes and adds that tax back. So the American sugar plantation owners are going to want to become part of America because of this. Because if they're part of America, that tax won't apply, so more people in America will buy their sugar. Okay, because it'd be less expensive. Most people, when you go to the store, if you have a couple of choices, I mean, some people are different, but most people will choose the cheapest one. Well, when Hawaii had to add that tax to theirs, no longer was Hawaiian sugar the cheapest one in America. So there's a little bit of a overthrow, kind of a coup with Queen Lugliani. It was not very difficult. So, but it was kind of by force. And we annexed, that means making a state part of the United States. McKinley will annex Hawaii and they will become the 50th state in America during this time. 1900. So, Spanish-American War. Causes of the Spanish-American War, this splendid little war called by the Secretary of State, John Hay. We will talk more about him. So it kind of goes upwards, okay? And don't pay attention to the side over here yet. So here's the deal. There was Spanish misrule in Cuba. We're talking about Spain, the Spanish. They were living in Cuba. We've got the Monroe Doctrine. So we're like, what do we need to do? Because I mean, it's a threat, but do we really mean it? Then there's Jingoism, an intense, aggressive form of nationalism. Okay. And this emerges during imperialism. Okay. The idea that we can use aggressive forces to take over. So the Cubans, this will be like, I think it's the third. Jose Marti is going to be, he's actually a poet, will be like the third Cuban rebellion that tries to get, their freedom from the Spanish. Okay. And the third time, they are going to actually start to attack. Some of the Americans have plantations down in Cuba. And so Marty's Cuban revolt will be smart, okay? And they will attack some of those sugar plantations. Now, they will make it look like it's the Spanish, but it's going to get the Americans involved, okay, and get them upset. So now Americans are forced to help the Cubans get their freedom. Valeriano Weyler, okay, he is the Spanish minister in Cuba. He starts to put Cubans into concentration camps. And this is where yellow journalism comes in. So he does this. This is brutal. This is awful. But, the nugget of truth is that, yes, they were going into concentration camps. Well, yellow journalists expand on this idea and over exaggerate and have pictures and headlines talking about Weyler burning babies, Cuban babies. So that starts to hit the heartstrings, okay, of your average American. So it pulls them in and makes this push, yellow journalism, U.S. push to fight these horrible Spanish, and they are horrible. But were they throwing babies in the fire? Not quite that literal. And then we have the DeLome letter. It was a letter written by the Spanish minister, okay, was sent to Cuba, and it was intercepted by the Americans. And basically it was published in newspaper, and it called President McKinley weak. So this upsets, we're the best. Our president isn't weak. Oh my goodness, we have to show him otherwise. And so then the last straw, the USS Maine. It was sent to kind of show a force or threat, not really. It wasn't sent by McKinley to necessarily, start a war. Okay. So, but it blows up in the harbor of Havana in Cuba, and 260 United States will die. Now, come to find out, it was engine combustion. Years later. But who did the press say that it was? The Spanish. So we start the Spanish-American War. Okay, there's going to be two places that we physically fight: the Philippines and Cuba. Okay, we take Guam pretty easy. It's not really a, the first shots will be in Manila Bay. Teddy Roosevelt will be the secretary, will be the SecNav at the time. Commodore Dewey is going to be the one that runs everything over in Manila, and he's going to spend from May to August capturing Manila, which is kind of their capital for the Philippines. And then Cuba, in the meantime, there is going to be, fighting there to end it in June. The tropical disease is going to be the biggest threat, but Teddy Roosevelt, in the meantime, is going to resign as SECNAV. He is going to lead this volunteer force of Rough Riders, that's what they're going to be called, and that cavalry is going to charge over San Juan Hill, and in the end, the battle at Santiago Bay, July 3rd, will be the last battle. Okay. So a few months and we put down the Spanish. Okay. In these places. So what do we do now? So if you look sideways, I don't know that I can flip it. The treaty ends the war. It recognized Cuba as independent. Okay, we put in a Teller amendment and kind of make them do a little bit that they may not want to do, but ultimately we leave Cuba alone, obviously, and then Castro takes over forever. U.S. will acquisition Puerto Rico and Guam. Puerto Rico and Guam. They will become protectorates of the United States, and they're fine. They want to be. Okay, they're cool with it. But then the U.S. is going to buy the Philippines for $20 million from the Spanish. The problem with this is going to be the Filipinos do not want the Americans in their country. And they will fight us, and we will spend a ton of money putting down rebellion after rebellion against Emilio Aguinaldo. And in the end, I think it'll be towards when we start World War II is when we will, or at the end, we will wipe our hands of the Philippines, and they will not become part of America. General MacArthur will actually be very revered in the Philippines. But that's kind of the story of imperialism. Kind of short, sweet, to the point. And we will pick up from here later.